Hello, hello. Great to start another session of the Tale of Two AIs podcast. Today, my guest is Justin Swansburg, founder of ES Consulting, a firm that specializes in enterprise AI. He was formerly the VP of Applied AI at DataRobot, where he led a large team of data scientists and ML engineers that were advising businesses across the globe on how to leverage Gen AI and machine learning to solve their business problems. I've known Justin for a while. Justin has worked with hundreds of customers across many verticals, including financial services, retail, insurance, healthcare, manufacturing, etc. The cool thing is he's had a front row seat on the evolution of AI in the enterprise and has lots of thoughts to share on ML and AI. So welcome, Justin. Really excited to have you as a guest on this episode of The Tale of Two AIs. We'll explore a range of different topics at the intersection of AI agents, data science, and the future of enterprise applications. Great to have you.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for the invite, and I appreciate the kind words.
Awesome, man. So let's start with what you were doing at DataRobot. Tell us a little bit about some of the interesting projects you were working on and what led you to venture out on your own, start ES Consulting, and what do you see, coming down the pike for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke. So I've been at DataRobot, or I was at DataRobot, I should say, for 8 years. So we actually have to hop in the Wayback Machine. When I first joined, predictive AI was all the rage, and it was still in its early days. So a lot of the work that the data science team did was evangelical. We had to go around and introduce the concept and spend a long time not only bringing people along with us and painting a vision of the art of the possible, but also doing a lot of problem framing in road mapping workshops so people could understand just what this technology was capable of. And if you roll back the clock, or I guess fast forward now to when Gen AI hit the scene, it was the same thing again. And it's almost like I worked at two different companies over the course of those 8 years. The one thing that hasn't changed, though, is all these companies I realize do need help. It's one thing to have powerful technology, but it's something else entirely to actually embed it into a large organization. These are big ships that are difficult to turn, and converting tech into a real world business problem that solves an acute issue just requires someone that has done this before. So I am thrilled that I was able to work with such an excellent team of data scientists that were excellent at what they do. And the big reason to answer your original question in terms of why I ended up leaving not too long ago was just to pursue more of that. So I can separate myself from the software, just focus on the business problem. And everything really just becomes a menu. There's a lot of powerful open source tools. There are a lot of excellent commercial tools. And I have the choice, the pick of the litter, if you will, just to focus on what the best tools are for each problem.
Yeah, and there are new tools just coming on board every other day. I mean, the space is changing just so fast. It's incredible.
It is a full-time job. Let me tell you, you could just
Just
that's
to keep up.
research, just keeping up on what's new every day.
No kidding. No kidding. Yeah, I mean, every other day there's something new that happens. And, as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking about, okay, what is the implication of this new thing on what we're doing, right? How can I either incorporate it or position ourselves alongside it or whatever have you? And I think one of the things we're definitely going to talk about over the course of this podcast is AI agents and how you see things coming up. But before we get there, let's talk about a little bit about your background, your career progression, and how you arrived at this role. I mean, obviously, you're in a really cool purge, and there are a lot of new grads as well as folks who are looking at agentic AI and thinking about, okay, how can they position themselves or just be part of this revolution that's going on. It'd be
Yeah,
helpful to understand what got you here and what do you see going forward.
yeah, for sure. I think if you take a step back, there are probably two types of people. There are the folks that really enjoy and are good at building technology. And then there are the folks whose brains are wired to ask, how do I apply this technology? And I'm very much in the latter camp. So before DataRobot. I did a tour of duty in consulting for a long time. And I've always just seen technology as a means to an end. Of course, at DataRobot, they collected just phenomenal world-class talent. And I was never going to contribute meaningfully on the technology development side. So the niche, or my niche, really was, how do I use this technology that's improving so quickly and then actually apply it to businesses? That's really where I've focused most of my tenure at DataRobot, and now it's 100% of my focus at ES.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, like you were mentioning before, I think regardless of what the technology cycle is, right? Whether it was the internet or the cloud or social media or something else that's going to have AI, some, quantum, whatever else comes next. The big challenge for businesses is, okay, what's the implication of this new technology on the way things get done within their organizations, right? And how to apply this technology. So that's a superpower to have because every organization out there needs it.
Yep, I think it's that. And then how do you push the frontier? How do you stretch the technology's capabilities just to tackle as many problems as possible? And you can always push a little bit further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell us about, we're talking about some of the applied use cases and applications of technology. So tell us about some of the most interesting problems, use cases you're working on now or worked on over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting about ML is that the types of problems you can apply all of these approaches to will keep you on your toes. I remember when I first joined DataRobot, one of the earliest projects was trying to actually predict how many chickens in a barn would survive for a large meat
No
producer.
way.
And we had to try and
That is
figure
so
out
cool.
things like the threat of tornadoes or a farmer leaving the barn door open and letting an eagle get in. And I just thought, wow, if this provides value, there's even more opportunity than I thought. But to start, back in the day, before Gen AI, way back in the day, a lot of the use cases were more straightforward classification and regression. Right. So you'd be predicting things like how likely is a customer to churn or upsell, or how likely is a mortgage borrower to default on his or her loan. And of course, they could get more or less interesting. In the advent of Gen AI, though, there's an entirely different paradigm. There's a different set of questions unlocked that you can start to ask. I think the beauty is you can ask them in natural language. So for me, the most interesting thing that's happened is actually the ability to interleave generative AI with predictive AI. And that's where I spent most of my time over the last 12 or 18 months. So as an example, rather than just predicting, let's say, how at risk a customer is, the likelihood they'll renew their contract, you can now, in natural language, ask a chatbot or an application, which of my customers are at risk? Can you please identify what the risks are and then come up with an action plan to mitigate that risk? And the generative AI is actually smart enough to understand that it has access to predictive models that'll help pull that back. And as everyone's probably heard, context is everything as far as these agents go. And I think predictive models are a really underappreciated source of excellent context.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think the use case that you just described, right, or the example that you just described here, it smacks of like an agentic flow, right, where a question basically is triggering the AI or an AI application, for the lack of a better way of defining it, to go off and look for the right data and access the right set of tools to then figure out, okay, how to answer the question that was originally asked, right? How do you look at the view at the world of agentic AI? There is so much hype around that. Can you help demystify that a little bit?
Yeah. So it is overwhelming at times, but I do think that predictive AI can complement generative AI, and generative AI can complement predictive AI. It is a bi-directional street. And despite all of the momentum that Gen AI has, there's still probably 10 times as many traditional predictive use cases. And for me, generative AI is the biggest tailwind or benefit is just how much easier it makes accessing those predictive models. So if you need to query them, rather than having to bribe your software developer friend to help write a REST API request, you can now actually make that same request in plain English. And on top of that, you can actually act. So it's not just getting information back, it's then using the information to make decisions. And the models can help exactly do that. So maybe another quick example, one of my favorite actually. DataRobot would spend a lot of time in the oil and gas industry. You can imagine for wells or oil rigs, it's really important that they are fully utilized. So they're always up and running. And engineers spend a lot of time trying to ensure that happens. There are a lot of predictive models that will help predict or anticipate the risks. Is there going to be some type of part failure? And the concept is preventative maintenance. If we can predict it in advance, we can fix it, so to speak, before it breaks. But this requires that you ask the right questions of the model, and then you figure out how to make the predictions valuable. So if you fast forward into the world of agents in Gen AI, you can now have a chatbot, whereas a technician or an engineer, you can say, across all of the oil wells that I manage, which of them are most likely to fail in the next, let's say, 15 days? Then tell me what the contributing factors are. So what parts are most at risk? And then pull in the training manual or any of the actual guidelines that explain to me how I can go about replacing that part. And all of that can be done in a single query back and forth powered by natural language. So just building out the ecosystem that really makes the core predictive technology so much more valuable.
Yeah, I love that example. And what you just described, I think that's in many ways been the mantra for feature byte as well, right? Because one of the things we see is as the world becomes a lot more agentic, to your point, context is king, right? Context is the way that a lot of these enterprise agentic workflows in the enterprise are going to be smarter, more powerful, and actually add a lot of value. And that's something somehow seems to be missing from the understanding of the general agentic space. Surprisingly, not just from executives, but also from the data scientists themselves. What are the, what's been your experience in the space? Like, what advice would you give to data science teams and to executives on the business side who are, helping drive the kinds of projects that these teams engage in?
Yeah, I would absolutely encourage everyone just to repeat out loud exactly what you just said. It is so true that this technology compounds, and FeatureByte has done a really good job taking advantage of that bidirectional street I mentioned, where you and the team have applied Gen AI to improve predictive models. And then you've also leveraged the output from predictive models to feed in as input to generative models. It's a complete cycle. And for whatever reason, I think the data science community writ large tends to view these concepts as a lot more orthogonal than they truly are. In fact, at the end of the day, what is a large language model? It's just a variant of deep learning architecture. It is
Indeed.
exactly what predictive learning used to be a few years ago. So they're not all too different.
What should be the role of data scientists? In some ways, there's even some thought that, hey, data science is dead, which I just don't buy at all. But I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I also patently disagree. I think if anything, it makes the role that much more important. You've got a much larger audience that you can serve. And if you were an internal data science team yesterday and you compare the amount of inbound requests you'd get for models to today, I'm sure it's grown by an order of magnitude just because there's that much more attention being paid to AI. And there are executives saying, I need some of that. Give me some of that too.
Right.
But I think in terms of almost advice that I'd give to data scientists, you've got to figure out where you can add value. And for me, these models, like I said earlier, they're means to an end. They're tools that you can use to serve a purpose, just like arrows in a quiver. So if you think about the value stack, sure, you can dive really deep into pre-training and post-training and RL, which is of course important, but there's a lot of opportunity, and I don't think to date has really gotten as much attention as it has deserved around what do you do with these models and what can you do after in terms of engineering context, explaining the output, integrating them into workflows, incorporating predictive models as tools that actually can add to the overall accuracy just as much as any messing around with weights inside the language model scale.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, the more tools that the agents are able to use, the better and more context they have, the better they're able to get from point A to point B and really translate the question or the job at hand to some meaningful end result.
And then the other point that I'd make that I don't think was obvious to me right away, in terms of the importance of predictive AI or ML, if the world evolves the way I expect it to, and there's just a massive proliferation of agents and Gen AI, you're going to be calling predictive models a lot more often, and you're going to be churning out a lot more use cases, which means the accuracy of each individual use case becomes a lot more important. Humans won't have the bandwidth to actually review all of these predictions every time. And because there's going to be so many more consumers, every percent increase in accuracy is just going to get magnified in terms of value.
Right.
So having some foundation where you can ensure that your models are accurate as possible is actually more valuable in a generative AI world as opposed to less valuable.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think both the volume of use cases as well as, to your point, the accuracy of these use cases and how quickly they're churned out just becomes so much more important in an agentic world. I'm keen to see how that message sort of proliferates. And I feel like as teams build more agents and they realize that, oh, okay, in order to make those agents smarter, there has to be a lot more data-based context that becomes available for those agents. I think that the more there's going to be a need for data science and data scientists building these use cases out. So just shifting gears a little bit, right? In this new sort of consulting kind of a role, right? You're looking at use cases not just in the context of, oh, okay, well, help build a simple agent or a simple predictive model or a series of predictive models, right? You're looking at problems that are end to end. What do you see? How do you see, businesses thinking about applications within their organizations? How are enterprise applications themselves evolving, or some of these workflows evolving?
Yeah, I think that the biggest takeaway so far has just been the number of use cases that we can now tackle that we probably wouldn't have even attempted to a while ago. So maybe another great example, imagine you are in a marketing team or a marketing agency. In the past, we'd normally unleash predictive AI to try and predict something like customer intent or behavior, or this process called next best action, where you recommend potential upsell or cross-sell opportunities. But nowadays, in this new world, you can actually take it a step further and say, if I understand each individual and I've got a predictive model telling me which products to offer, and why can't I feed that into a generative model to actually create a highly tailored email that speaks to his or her personal situation? And again, it's one-to-one personalization at scale where you couldn't really do it beforehand. So for me, inside organizations, it's more of a matter of education. Just this is now possible today in this world we live in, where it very much wasn't before. And you start to connect data across all these different systems. So if you're in go-to-market, you need to buddy up with marketing. If you're in marketing, you need to cozy up with sales. If you're in sales, you need to buddy up with finance. All of that data is important for the context for any individual problem.
That is super cool. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. These types of applications are going to be more and more the norm, right?
Right.
Where, AI or Gen AI in particular just allows for some really interesting applications. But they have to be served with the right set of data in order to make the outputs a lot more interesting and relevant to whatever the use case might be.
And I think the biggest thing that hopefully will happen, here's my prediction for the podcast here. I believe that a lot of predictive models in the past were built to serve a specific purpose. So let's go back and revisit the churn example.
Mm-hmm.
You might have an analytics or customer analytics team that builds churn. Those churn scores get fed into your CRM, and account managers rely on that at renewal time. Or maybe they get incorporated into forecasts.
Right.
I think in this new world, that prediction model will be a centralized service that all these different agentic apps will have access to. So any agent that wants to reach out to a tool will now be able to grab that with the appropriate context and incorporate into their workflow. So you can be in finance, in marketing, in sales, in go-to-market, in customer success. It does not matter. And you can use that centralized model.
Yeah, that is super interesting. It's the number of potential consumers of these predictions or whatever data and insights that are available that are meaningful for different types of workflows is just going to explode.
Right. Now, imagine asking a colleague that might not be as technical or a non-data scientist, sure, you want predictions for the likelihood this customer will churn, go hit this REST API, and here's the exact endpoint, and here are the parameters you need to add in JSON.
Right.
And today, it's, oh, you want that? Just type your question out in plain English into this chat input.
Right.
And it really does make it a lot more accessible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so what does that do to the number of applications or workflows in the enterprise itself?
I actually think you'll get much more prescriptive workflows. So you're going to have a lot more of them because you can better target each one. You don't need to paint with as broad of a brush.
Yeah.
I also think that it's going to introduce a lot of agents, and we're still very much in the early days. A lot of it doesn't work, but if you skate to where the puck is going, there will be some important unlocks, and all of a sudden, this is going to look entirely different. Where these agents, even though they might be fairly generic, you'll be able to customize them for individual prescriptive tasks. And again, one of the biggest tools in their tool belt will be these predictive models. In fact, there's probably a world not too far away where these agents have the ability to call services that will build models on the fly to answer their questions.
No doubt.
So your boss comes to you and asks, our pipeline or demand gen numbers are down for the quarter. What's going on? The agent might have the autonomy or agency to go out, use a service, build a highly accurate model with the right data, try and extract some insights, and then report back.
Yeah, I totally see that as well, because there are going to be new applications or use cases generated where the AI or the agent may figure out that, hey, I need certain predictions based on data that's available in order to solve the use case. And, then that requires another agent to go off and build a model that ultimately becomes the, feeder into the original agent. So speaking of agents and, just the hype around the whole agentic AI space, given your engagement with different clients now, what are some of the best examples that you've seen of agents either truly being deployed in production or coming fairly close to getting there?
The most recent set of examples that are starting to work really well are leveraging or applying agents against structured data. So imagine you have a data warehouse like Snowflake, or even a better example, imagine you've built some model. Let's say you've got a time series forecasting model or a regression model. You can now run what I call what if analyses or sensitivity analyses and prompt it to say, give me what would happen in all these different counterfactual scenarios. So maybe you're forecasting something like ticket response time. How quickly can my team triage support tickets? And then you've got 5 or 6 different scenarios that the generative algorithm comes up with to test the model. So now, again, the model's abstracted. You're not using it for a single purpose. You're interrogating it with a generative model to try and figure out what that range of possibilities might be. Same thing for some telco companies. You might be looking to minimize the number of service incidents, and you've got a new router. there's a bunch of different configurations or settings. What is the optimal setting or configuration that's going to reduce the number of those service incidents or roll the fewest amount of trucks?
Yeah. Yeah. So in some ways, it also is allowing you to create almost like a digital twin of some service and be able to simulate it to just understand what the implications of that service might be down the road.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think the biggest unlock really is all of these, I'll call them experiments,
Yeah.
used to take time to write out by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And now you just have the bandwidth to test so many more in a shorter amount of time. So
Right.
the whole iterative cycle is just collapsed, which is excellent.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, just given the fact that there's so much change going on in the space, there's something new that happens every other day. What advice would you give leaders in the space, whether they're AI leaders or business leaders, just to stay ahead of the game, just to keep up?
Yeah.
Or is there even a possibility of keeping up?
Yeah, obviously, I don't think anyone knows where the space is heading, but I think there's really no substitute for just playing around with some of the capabilities to get a sense for what they're already capable of today. I think that there's an underappreciation of their current abilities, and every org can be doing a lot more today than they even realize. So, to some extent, the fact that they're going to get better in the future is just icing on the cake. Why don't you take advantage of what you already can today? And I think the way to think about the evolution is these models are really good at asking or answering questions, I should say, given the right context. But everything starts to break down when they require either more context or the types of questions get a little bit ambiguous. And all of that will get ironed out over time as they can naturally suck up more tokens in their context window and improve their coherence. So today they might be able to go off for a minute or two to solve a task. In a couple months, it might be an hour or two. And in a couple years, they might be off working on their own independently for a few days. But fundamentally, they're still solving the same types of problems. So if you get that scaffolding and that muscle memory down today, you're going to be so much better off tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think experimentation for businesses is super, super critical just to build up that muscle memory, as you mentioned. And yeah, what I see, and just curious to get your thoughts, some of these businesses, some of these organizations are almost like at a standstill, waiting for things to settle before they dive in. Do you see that?
I have seen a lot of that. A lot of these enterprises are a bit gun shy because they're worried about making the wrong choice. And I never fully understood it, although I can appreciate it. Folks don't want to make a mistake. But the fact of the matter is there are gains to be had today.
Now,
And by waiting, it's a larger and larger opportunity cost the more you wait.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, the frictions migrating between services are actually getting ironed out. So they are falling, not growing.
Yeah.
And it's going to get easier and easier in the future to swap in and out different underlying language model services.
Yeah.
What you really need is all the scaffolding around it.
Absolutely. And an understanding of what's really possible, what's really feasible. So what, just looking down the pike, what excites you the most about some of the developments in this space that you're seeing from your vantage point?
I am really interested in this whole concept of tools and tooling. And so just really quick as a primer, what makes a system agentic, so to speak, I know it's a buzzword these days, is if you endow a language model with the ability to perform actions on your behalf. And the universe of potential actions are often referred to as these tools. So language models can request to execute a tool. They're aware of what tools are available, and they can run these in a loop. So they can call as many different tools as they want until they're satisfied they've accomplished the problem. And I truly think that agents are really only as good as the tools they have at their disposal. And I don't think enough attention is being paid to that tooling layer. Every organization is going to require some bespoke, super specialized set of tools
Yeah.
in order for the agent to work. And I think people are slowly
100%.
waking up to that, but I
Yeah.
love it. Obviously great for consulting.
Yeah.
And I think it's only going to grow.
Someone that I was talking to mentioned building a bunch of nano services that these agents or AI applications, it used to be AI applications, now agents can actually reach out and talk to and invoke in order to get certain action done on the user's behalf, right?
Yeah.
Building
The
those
way I
nano
think about
services
it
is
is that
super important. Yeah.
100%. I view the agent as the orchestration layer. It's the intelligence or the brain,
Yeah.
and the tools are the arm, the actual services that get run, which means they need to include the business logic that makes decisions for you. And
Yeah.
that's where the value accrues.
I
So
love
it
it.
is
Yeah.
essential.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to think about it. This is a question I ask every guest that I have on the podcast, which just allows folks to think about, okay, where to go next, right? So what resources do you bank on to keep you updated with the latest in AI? Give us 2 or 3 that are your go-tos.
Yeah, so this is going to be a bit of a cheesy answer, but I don't think there's any substitute for just going online, going to ChatGPT or Claude, downloading a cursor, and vibe coding, which is all the rage these days. I have lots of friends, former colleagues that are not technical whatsoever, and they can start to build apps that actually help them day to day. Maybe it is a set of tasks for you to remember the to-dos. Maybe it is a set of suggestions for you for the next concert to attend. But everyone is now capable of building these. And I don't think people realize it.
Yeah.
So they just got to get in and start doing it. I also think in terms of folks that are maybe a bit more clued in to the goings on, X is an excellent spot if you follow the right researchers and data scientists. And then my favorite content source is just YouTube, hands down.
Interesting. Okay. A good old YouTube. I love it.
Good old YouTube.
But to your point, I think just trying things out, because it's just become so much easier to go and build your own applications. Even if you don't want to go to cloud, just go to Replit or go to Lovable and at least see what the state of the art and state of possible is.
Yeah. In fact, I'll end with an anecdote here. I was at dinner with a handful of asset managers the other week. None of them were technical by nature. And they were all explaining to me that they use one of these language models to schedule tasks. So obviously they care a lot about earnings and 8Ks, 10Qs,
Sure.
10Ks. They now have the Groks and XAI and all of these different online language model providers actually scouring the web for this information on a regular schedule and then reporting back information, something that they would normally have to do manually.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everyone to say, what do I do day to day?
Yeah.
Itemize it, and then see which of those tasks you can automate.
Absolutely. Either makes for a really productive or a really lazy world. We shall see.
Exactly.
All right. Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Justin. It's great to talk to you as always. Really appreciate you spending the time and look forward to what's in store. And I'm sure we'll catch up again very soon on one of these podcasts down in the future.
Absolutely. And best of luck going forward. Thanks for the invite. This was fun, as always.
Absolutely, man. Take care.